welcome to Agathos Ministries for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministry. This is Pastor Scott Conway talking about young Jesus, the third lesson in young Jesus. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be going to Matthew chapter 2 today. So if you want to get your Bibles prepped for Matthew chapter 2, you can start doing that right now. Young Jesus. So, Matthew chapter 2, starting in verse 13. In verse 13, the Magi have just left. So the Magi were there, now they've gone. The Magi had gone to see Herod, so Herod knows that the Persian Magi have come here looking for the one born the King of the Jews. Herod wanted them to come back and to see him. And they were warned of God to go back another way and headed off without going back to tell Herod. So there's some danger though. The Magi have just left. Matthew 2, verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. Now this is pretty serious. I mean, it's get out of Israel, get out of Roman territory, get out of Herod's area, and go to another country, head off to Egypt. Now, the Roman Empire, of course, included Egypt too, but Herod had no sway in Egypt. If Herod was going to want to do things in Egypt, he was going to need permission. So they're gone. So here's the principle. When danger strikes, you need to consider your options and make wise choices. Now, that's pretty obvious, right? When danger strikes, you need to consider your options and make wise choices. Now, it's pretty obvious if the government is going to try to kill your baby. That's pretty clearly a high level of danger. The dangers that we are involved in day to day aren't usually quite at the life and death level. Not in modern America, but around the world for some people it is. In some neighborhoods it is. In some parts of the world it is. But even for us to consider danger. Now here's a few key things. A few automatic responses tend to run in about this order. Freeze, fight, or flight. Now usually you'll hear the idea of fight or flight. But it's actually not fight or flight. It's freeze, fight, or flight. People's first reflex when they're in danger is to freeze. There's that startled freeze. Now the reason we are programmed to freeze is, number one, it helps you hide from predators. Predators notice movement. And so if you freeze, it's possible the predator won't see you. Also, freezing is the lowest energy solution. Another solution to dealing with a fearful situation is to fight. So if the reason you're afraid is this thing is attacking you now, then you can fight it. Or you can run from it. And that's fight. Freeze, fight, or flight. So a lot of times when someone is afraid, like afraid they're about to be found out, there's this startled freeze before they do anything else. And that's one of the ways you can tell someone's afraid, is do they have just this sudden cessation of motion? The FBI actually uses that as one of their interrogation techniques. If they ask you a question and your body suddenly freezes up, then they know something about that question scares you. Now, it doesn't mean you're guilty, but it does mean something about that question scares you. Now, it could be as simple a thing as, oh my God, they think I did it. So they don't jump to the conclusion that you're guilty, but they know that you're uneasy about that. A fight is getting combative. Now, when people know they're not in any physical danger, they might not flee, they might not just freeze, they might just want to fight you, argue with you, be belligerent, be annoying. And a lot of times they do that, again, out of fear. So if someone takes a very aggressive stance with you and there doesn't really appear to be a valid reason for it, or their aggression is actually counterproductive to what they're trying to accomplish, then that's another way you can tell that someone is coming from a position of fear, or one of the fear-centered emotions, like insecurity, that they feel insecure, they feel small, and so they're trying to puff themselves up by being loud, by being belligerent, by using coarse language to try to get you to submit, when what they really need to do is get you to cooperate. Now, and I'm dealing with someone who's doing that with me right now. He's behaving like he's the drill instructor and I'm a noob at Annapolis, where I have to just put up with whatever he says and do it, and if he tells me I need to be up at 3:30 in the morning with a toothbrush scrubbing the latrine, I'm required to do that. The drill instructors are doing that to try to break down your sense of individuality so they can break up a sense or build up a sense of teamwork. So there's a purpose to it. But when an adult does that to another adult without having the proper station to do that, that tells you they're coming from a position of fear and insecurity. They feel small, they feel uncertain, and so they'll come out being critical, they'll come out being belligerent, they'll come out being judgmental, and that tells you they're scared. And the more scared they are, the bigger they're going to do freeze, fight, or flight. And then flight can show up in just simple ways. Passive-aggressive, where I want to fight, but I don't feel up to fighting. But if I just back away and I just don't do what I'm supposed to do, if I just distance myself from the relationship, if I just don't return an email, if I might be in your physical presence, but I don't acknowledge your existence, that's a version of flight. And so freeze, fight, or flight. So if you're aware, it's not just fight or flight. The reflex is freeze, fight, or flight. So you have to know when to stand your ground. You have to know when to fight, and you have to know when to flee. The automatic reflexes that are triggered by the self-protection reaction of your emotions will automatically kick into one of these. But you need to know, is freezing appropriate? Should you be standing your ground? Is fighting appropriate? Should you be engaging with this threat? Or should you flee? Should you just get out of its way? So a government's coming after your baby. How are you going to stand against a government coming after your baby? 5 centurions get sent out with 100 men each. Heck, it's Bethlehem. Population's maybe 3,000. 1 centurion gets sent out with his 100 men to come kill your baby. Does freeze sound like it's going to be wise? Probably not. Fight. That's not going to last too long. So what's left? To flee. Now there's other options too, that if you have time to assess it, can you engage in discussion? Can you deal with someone human being to human being? Can you try to understand, define, be understood? Okay, Herod wants to kill your baby because your baby is the acknowledged king of the Jews, which would mean that it would dethrone him. Probably talking to him is not going to work. And the angel of the Lord appears to you and says, flee. So what are you going to do? The Magi brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So Joseph and Mary had some assets to take with them to flee to Egypt. We don't know how much they had, but they had enough to move and get set up in Egypt on very little notice. Because if the Magi left, the amount of notice that Joseph would have gotten is from the angel of the Lord to Herod issuing the order, right? Logically. How long would it take for Herod to realize the Magi aren't coming back to tell him exactly where to go? Bethlehem is less than a day away. It's about 8 miles. Figure for an entire entourage going, you're looking at a day. So they show up in Bethlehem, they see baby Jesus, and then they leave. When did they leave? Probably as early as the next day. So Herod's expecting that maybe in a couple of days. By about the 3rd or the 4th day, he might be wondering where they are. Well, they probably were spotted, because you're not just talking 3 guys on camels. They very likely had a huge entourage. This is a caravan that traveled from Persia into Israel, from Persian territory into Roman territory. It's probably a significant number of people. Herod could have found this out in just a couple of days, issued the order, and sent centurions down. The centurions could have been there by the end of the same day he issued the order, ready to kill all the kids. So it's possible Joseph got the warning, picked up, and left on less than a day's notice. He could have been warned in a dream, woke up in the morning, said, Mary, we're leaving for Egypt today. Pack everything up, let's go. And loaded up and went. But they had gold, frankincense, and myrrh, so they have some money. They've got some stuff that they can sell. So cash, money, and stuff that they can sell. Now, we don't know how much they had, because it doesn't tell us how much the Magi brought. But you got to figure, they probably didn't come to give them $1 worth of gold, 50 cents worth of frankincense, and a quarter of myrrh. And if you're going to launch an entourage to go bring these gifts to someone, you're probably going to bring a significant amount. So off they go to Egypt. So continuing from verse 13, and he arose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. Verse 14, continuing in 15, and was there until the death of Herod, that what was spoken of the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, out of Egypt did I call my son. Verse 16, when Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, he sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof. So it's like, let me go kill all the kids in San Diego and all the suburbs. So it's going to hit not just downtown. We're going to catch Tirisana, San Carlos. We're going to go into La Mesa and El Cajon, get all of the surrounding territory to make sure that, when it says Bethlehem, it doesn't have to be in the town limits. That, could be somewhere right around there. And all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. So if you have a child that's under the age of 2, now I don't imagine they probably took someone's word for it. If the kid looked like the kid might have been under the age of 2, the kid probably got killed. That would probably include a lot of 3-year-olds. Depending how familiar with children the people executing this order were, could have included some 4-year-olds too. Who knows? The fact that Herod killed all children born in the last 2 years is why we think the wise men could have taken up to 2 years from seeing the star to their arrival. And there's some other reasons too, one of which is, how long does it take to launch the caravan? If the star appeared when Jesus was born, how long would it take for them to prep the caravan, gather all their things, and make the journey? We know that some time lapsed because they found Joseph, Mary, and Jesus at a house, not a manger. So we know that they didn't show up at the manger. Scripture tells us that. But, it could have been less than 2 years, could have been up to 2 years, was not likely more than 2 years. If it was more than 2 years, Herod would have been killing older kids. So here we go. Insecure people use counterfeit power. Insecure people use counterfeit power. This is the wrath of the insecure. When someone feels weak, and this goes back to what we were just talking about the freeze, fight, or flight, when someone's responding out of fear, that when you're insecure, you will use counterfeit power. This is what Herod did. And since we just had our introduction of freeze, fight, or flight, you have part of this idea already going for you. When someone feels weak, and that's part of the insecurity of weakness, not just fear, but insecurity. I'm not enough. Fear is something's coming, I'm not ready. Insecurity is I'm not enough. For whatever it is you think you need to be enough to do, you don't feel like you're enough. Well, Herod is insecure. Herod is insecure in his political power base. He's had some problems holding on to power. He was appointed king of the Jews by Caesar. So the Roman Empire is where he gets his authority from, and he has to rule over the Jews. And so if the Jews have someone that the Jews acknowledge as their king, that's going to be a problem for Herod. So he is literally insecure in his political position. He's literally insecure in his power base. Evidently, he was insecure as a human being as well. When someone feels weak, they will pretend to strength. But it's a pretense. Now, here's the interesting thing about someone pretending to strength. When someone pretends to strength, they think they look strong. Other people who are equally or more insecure will acknowledge it as strength. It will seem strong to the equally or the more greatly insecure. But to people who truly have strength, it looks weak. Counterfeit power reveals weakness to those who truly have power. Now, false power, this pretending to strength with some kind of show of false power, includes physical force, as Herod used, sending people to go hack and slash and kill all of these kids. But it can also be things like manipulation. That I don't think that I have a legitimate argument, so I'm going to try to manipulate you. I'm going to try to tug on your heartstrings in an inappropriate way. I'm going to try to get you to think something that's not true so I can get you to do something you wouldn't normally do. It's intimidation. That I'm going to try to be belligerent, puff myself up, threaten you, get you to back down because you're scared of me. I'm going to lie to you. That I'm going to try to get you to believe a falsehood. And what's interesting is sometimes when people lie or they're very deceptive about who they are, they'll pretend what we call the schmooze or putting on the show. They do that because they know that's what it's supposed to look like. But interestingly enough, they don't do what it's supposed to be. Not really. They pretend to it. They lie about it. They create the show when the reality behind it is something very, very different. So that tells you there, you know enough to know what the truth ought to be, because that's what you're saying or that's what you're trying to display, but it's a deception. That's not really what the truth is. Or cheating, related to lying, but cheating is trying to get away with breaking the rules, trying to do things in the way you ought not do things to get what you want. Stealing, which is obviously stealing, or any immoral or amoral shortcuts to get what they want. Why do people do that? Usually they do that because they do not see a legitimate way for them to get it. Why not? Because they lack the skills. They lack the internal resources. They lack the maturity. They lack the education. They lack something, and because they feel like they feel insecure, rather than grow into becoming what they ought to be, rather than working and building up what they ought to be doing, rather than establishing a foundation for who they ought to be and what they ought to be able to do, and then building on top of that foundation, they just pretend to it. And they exhibit or use this counterfeit power to try to cover up their insecurity and cover up their weakness. But anybody who is secure recognizes it as a wildly dysfunctional manifestation of insecurity. They can tell what it really is. That's why bravado seldom works in bad neighborhoods. If you're being threatened and you puff up your chest and put your hands on your, oh yeah, you could have beat me on the best day of your life. That they know if you're covering up for fear because they're not afraid because they've done this before. And they can tell when someone is really scared, they're just pretending to power. And they know who they can back down and they know who they can't back down. And the predators will let you go if you're someone that they can't intimidate. But if you puff yourself up, you're responding with a fear response, even if it looks like you're being aggressive, they can tell because they're not afraid, because they know what they're doing. They've done this to people before, and they can sense the fear, even if it's being covered up. So this is the same thing with people who truly have internal power. The truly secure, the truly mature can tell when someone's compensating. And if someone is just okay in this area, or they just have enough experience dealing with insecure people in this area, even if they themselves are also insecure, because maybe they're working on it, they can tell. Has anyone ever watched anyone compensating? You listen to someone vocabulary-wise compensating, and you say like, okay, just don't try so hard is usually what we tell them. Just relax. Take it easy. Just be yourself. But they can't be themselves because they feel themselves is inadequate. Well, such methods are seldom satisfying. Anyone who uses physical force, manipulation, intimidation, lying, cheating, stealing, immoral, amoral shortcuts will seldom find it satisfying. Just as an example, as a man, if I get to the end of something and I know that I lied, cheated, and stole my way to this win, I got the contract, I got the business deal, I got paid, but I know that I cheated. I know that I lied. Basically what it boils down to is I know I don't deserve what I got. If I know I don't deserve what I got, do I get to the end of that and go, I'm a man. Did you see how I lied, cheated, stealed, manipulated, intimidated, and was immoral and amoral in that? That's a man! No, I'm going to feel horrible. That any kind of human being who has any level of maturity is going to realize that all that stuff you did because you felt bad makes you feel bad. And that you don't feel better for winning, you only feel happy that you got what you wanted, but it doesn't make you feel more solid as a human being. Or same thing in a relationship. I dealt with women who have done this one just recently, where she compromised her personal integrity. She compromised her character She did stuff she knew she shouldn't do and that wasn't really who she was to try to get a guy. Do you think she was happy in that relationship? No, because she's not being her. That she is pretending to be a character that she thought this guy would like. And wonders why she still feels unloved even though she has her boyfriend. Well, she feels unloved because she is unloved. He doesn't even know her. All he knows is this character that she's playing. And it's not satisfying. So they often leave the person feeling even more insecure. Because then you feel like, okay, I already felt so bad that who I really am, what I can really do, isn't going to be enough. And so I pull out all of these pretend things, every shortcut, every cheat I can think of, and I still can't make it happen. So I'm not enough. All my cheating still isn't enough. Now that means if even the cheating me, even the lying me, even the pretending me still isn't enough, how much more insecure am I going to be about the real me? So here gets to be the thing about counterfeit power. I do it because I feel bad. And I feel bad because I do it. It's a nasty cycle. It's what a lot of overweight people have said, that I eat because I feel bad. I feel bad because I eat. That I keep eating all this junk food to comfort myself. But because I keep eating all this junk food, I feel bad about myself, and I need to be comforted. And so then I go eat more of the junk food, and then I feel worse. And so then I go eat more of the junk food, and then I feel worse. And then I look at myself in the mirror, and I don't like what I see, and I want to make it change, and I just feel so bad about it that I want to go eat more junk food. Well, it's the same thing in the wrath of the insecure. When an insecure person does these counterfeit things, they really do feel bad about it. Not bad enough to stop, mind you, because it's the only tool they think they've got. But about themselves as a human being, they begin to feel worse and worse because I keep pulling out all the stops and all this counterfeit. I'd use every cheat that I know, every trick that I know, and even cheating and trickery and lying and deceiving, I still can't make it happen. And then even if you can make it happen when you do it all that way, you know you don't deserve it. And every time you're getting things you know you don't deserve, that internal sense of guilt that I know I did not earn what I have. I am not worthy of what I have. It's hard enough for people to not be worthy of what they want, but to not be worthy of what you have, and you know you're not worthy of what you have, you'll feel bad. So then you start doing these cheats. And you realize, why am I doing these cheats? Because I know I'm not good enough. And every single time you do a cheat, you feel worse because every single time you do it reinforces the fact, I'm not enough. Now, has anyone ever watched this in action? I doubt we've seen any government leaders order the slaughter of anyone 2 years old and under. But most of us have seen this in action. Hopefully, not in our own lives. Hopefully it was somebody else doing it. But, to be honest, probably at some point in time and some point in our history, no matter how secure you might be today, all of us have probably done this stuff. I know I have. It's been a while for me, but I have. I can reflect back on my youth, and I can see where I did the pretense to power because I felt insecure. Now when I feel insecure, I take a different tact. It's okay. Why do I feel insecure? Now, if I feel insecure because I am insecure, why would Herod feel insecure in his power base? Because his power base was not secure. But then here's the different question. What would it take for me to be secure? What would it have taken for Herod to be secure? Well, Herod the Great, which is, I forget if it was this Herod's father or grandfather, but Herod the Great built the temple for the Jews. He made a promise and he kept the promise. You figure he was probably pretty secure in his power base. He built a relationship with the Jews connected to what was most important to them. He made them a promise, and he kept his promise. Figure he had some credibility going for him. Well, this Herod could have learned. So when you feel insecure, the question you ask is, how do I build up authentic security? How do I make secure what is really honestly insecure? Suppose you feel insecure in a relationship. How can you build up that security? That say, some guy compliments your wife because you have a beautiful wife. And there was one husband that had this happen, that the two of them were out and about, and some guy walked by and looked at his wife and go, wow, you're gorgeous. And he continues walking. He's not hitting on her. He's just commenting on, beauty. And this guy comes around the car, gets in this guy's face, and tries to yell, scream, back him off, intimidate him, while his poor wife is just absolutely mortified. So what's happening with this guy? He feels insecure in his marriage, so insecure that a stranger making a single compliment as he passes by, not hitting on his wife, a stranger making a compliment as he walks past them, riled him up. Now, if I were to counsel this young man, I would ask, why do you feel so insecure in your marriage? That's a very high level of insecurity. And what would it take for you to become secure? Now, if all of his answers were, well, guys shouldn't be complimenting a married woman. I tell him, all right, that's ridiculous. What do you need to do? I need to keep men away from my wife. Okay, that is also ridiculous. What do you need to be as a husband for you to feel as though it would be ridiculous for your wife to go anywhere but to you? Because, I'm one of those that greatly desires the ladies in my life to have their heart filled. So whether it's wives, girlfriends, I encourage them to have relationships and maintain relationships. Members of the same sex, members of the opposite sex, that when femininity is touched by masculinity, it stirs up the woman in a woman. So I always appreciate that in women that I've been romantically involved in. That's been true since high school for me. So this is like a 25, almost 30-year-old rule for me, is that I enjoy when my lady gets compliments and attention from other men. That's a pleasure to me because I see how it helps light her up. And if I'm the kind of man that I'm supposed to be for her, should that be a threat to me? No. Now, if she's got some issues, well, then she needs to deal with her issues. If I've got some issues, I need to deal with my issues. I don't want to have to lock her off from the entire world, handcuff her in her bedroom. Your classic father of the beautiful teenage daughter is like, well, I've figured out how I'm going to solve my beautiful teenage daughter. I'm going to lock her in her bedroom until she's 45. Now, you can't do that. That disrespects someone's humanity. So continuing from verse 16 up to verse 19. Verse 17. Then that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children. And she refused to be comforted, because they were no more. Verse 19. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying. So when the danger was done, Joseph brought his family home. The word of the angel was, arise and take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel. Herod's dead. Time to go home. Go into the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead. And he arose and took the child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. So when the danger was done, Joseph brought his family home. The fact that Joseph did not return and an angel did not appear until Herod was dead tells us that Herod is probably on the lookout for the baby the whole time. He may have known that the baby escaped. He may have known where the baby went. Maybe he knew that they headed off to Egypt and he had his border guards keeping an eye out. Maybe he didn't. We don't know. We know that whatever the situation was, he couldn't find or couldn't kill Jesus while Jesus was in Egypt. But he waited the rest of his life for a chance to kill this kid. That's pretty wild. Now, even if Jesus could have stood his ground when Herod came, when an angel of the Lord tells you to go to Egypt, you go. So if Joseph could have gone all crouching tiger, hidden dragon on Herod's troops, even if Joseph had the power like Elisha or Elijah to call down fire from the heavens and consume troops of men, and Herod could have sent them out by the 50s and had them slaughtered, if the angel says go, you go. Especially when you've had so many things happen to tell you that this really is the word of the Lord. Now, Joseph didn't just lay low until he thought it was safe. He waited for something more concrete. He knew up until this point in time, I've had a lot of angels showing up in dreams. Okay, if I get angels showing up in dreams telling me that, yes, when my fiancé says, I know I'm pregnant, I'm still a virgin, this is from God. And the angel shows up and says she's telling you the truth. Okay, I was willing to trust that. I'm willing to trust it if the angel shows up and says, someone's going to come kill the baby, go. Go now. All right, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but you want to wait around to find out. But now on this one, think about the level of trust this one takes too. You can go home now. It says, the whole killing of the baby thing, is that still going on? Everyone who wanted to kill him is dead. Really? How about Herod's son? Everyone who wanted to kill him before was dead, but once we show up again, is anyone new going to hit that list? I mean, there's a little bit of trepidation one should have here. But Joseph didn't just lay low until he thought it was if he waited for something more concrete. He did not just settle into Egypt to stay either. He didn't just say, okay, I'm leaving, I'm gone, game over, I'm never going back ever. I mean, he knows that his son's supposed to be the king of the Jews. He knows, well, if he's going to be the king of the Jews, somewhere in this equation, at least he has to go back. We can't just hide here forever. Can't be king of the Jews, growing up, growing old, and dying in Egypt. That's not really going to work, is it? So he was also ready to move back to Israel at any time. He knew God was doing something truly remarkable. And here's the scary thing to consider. So much of how it played out would be Joseph's responsibility. As the husband of Mary, as the father of Jesus, he has the social and the legal responsibility for this child until this child is of age. And he is required and expected to exhibit leadership and to be the patriarch here. How would you like to have to raise the Messiah? How would you like to have to raise God in the flesh? Now, on one hand, you've got to know, it's like, well, whether I mess up or not, somehow it's all going to work out. But still, that's a pretty serious responsibility. We know that Joseph remained open to divine leadership. But we don't know what happened to him. Just later on, he's just gone. When Jesus starts his ministry, Joseph is simply gone from the narrative. That we have Joseph and Mary. We have Joseph with young Jesus in the temple, which we'll be talking about next time. But then he's just gone. He's mentioned still as, isn't this the son of Mary and Joseph? But there's no Joseph. He might have been dead. We don't know what happened. But he probably had died. One of the most important parenting jobs in history. Joseph and Mary raising Jesus. And we know very little about it. Yeah, and what do? You get in an argument with your 3-year-old. What does most parents do? You just win. I mean, it's a 3-year-old. Okay, your 3-year-old is also God. There's an intimidation factor there. There's some parents that can't handle an actual 3-year-old. They get in an engagement with a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, and the kid wins. Imagine if your 3-year-old not only thinks he's God, like the average 3-year-old, but actually is. Jesus would be such a unique case. You're going, okay, let's bathe the baby. Get the baby to stop walking on the water. But Joseph likely did a brilliant job as a father. I mean, Jesus came out really, really good. And probably didn't come out that good from Joseph shirking his responsibilities. I mean, that would be, the same as if Mary decided, well, this is the child of God. Why do I need to feed this kid? I mean, it's God. God doesn't need food. God doesn't need diapers changed. God doesn't need to learn how to read or write or anything. It's God. But they were very likely very good parents. Now, it was probably intentional that Joseph is out of the narrative. It was probably intentional that Joseph died before Jesus began his ministry. Because if Joseph was still around culturally, he would take precedent over his son. If Joseph was still around, he would still be the patriarch of the family. And that if they had a problem with Jesus, they would go to Joseph and say, do something about your son. So very likely, Jesus was the oldest one in his family, and as the eldest son would have legal and cultural authority and would have nobody over him. So if Jesus was, say, a second brother and he had an older brother, then the Pharisees and Sadducees could have gone to the older brother, could have gone to the father, could have gone to the grandfather, and instructed them, you need to rein him in. So continuing to verse 23. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned by God in a dream, he departed for the regions of Galilee, and came and resided in a city called Nazareth, that was spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene. So, assess risk, choose wisely. When he saw that Herod's son was still around, he felt fear. What's fear? Something's coming. I'm not ready. It's like, okay, everyone who wanted to kill Jesus originally was dead, but Herod's son is here. And when Herod's son finds out that my kid was the one born king of the Jews, and that whole Persian Magi thing that he probably heard Dad talk about, that's this kid. He's probably going to want to kill him too. But he was apparently also warned that Herod's son might still be interested in Jesus. Because, God warned him in a dream, go somewhere else. Don't go back to Bethlehem, go somewhere else. So Joseph took his family to a place that would not be looked for by Herod or bothered with by him, back to Nazareth in Galilee. Now, Nazareth is thought to be a small town, a poor, dirty, nasty little place. We talked about that a little bit before. Later we have John chapter 1, verse 26. And Nathanael said unto him, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, come and see. So Nazareth is such a nasty place that one of the people who would be Jesus' disciple wants to know, can any good thing come out of that place? Nazareth? You kidding me? Philip says, come and see. Well, Nathanael becomes one of the 12, so he went and saw. Now that tells us a great deal about the reputation of Nazareth from those who knew the place. Nazareth is thought to be a bad neighborhood town. This is where Jesus grew up. He grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. He grew up in a nasty place. People often forget. People in bad neighborhoods are people. People in bad neighborhoods are people. People live there. People grow up there. People raise their family there. It is a small percentage of people that make bad neighborhoods bad. A small percentage of people make bad neighborhoods bad. Even the most dangerous neighborhoods. Think about it. The deadliest neighborhoods in the world were there people that were alive yesterday that are still alive today. Yeah. Will they still be alive tomorrow? Yeah. And the next day, and the next. Are there some of those old people living in these neighborhoods? Yeah. Some of them, someone's been around for 10, 20, 30 years in this neighborhood. Also, yeah. So bad neighborhoods make bad neighborhoods by a small percentage of people. So generalizations. Here's a generalization for you. Generalizations are never true. Even this one. Now this is the idea of a statistical truism versus an absolute truism. If I say, okay, in general, every woman on the planet is female. Okay, that's an absolute truism, because that's, well, by definition. That's like saying everybody over 6 feet tall is taller than 6 feet. Like, okay, you defined your category as fitting the category. But then there's statistical truisms. An example of a statistical truism is men are stronger than women. Is that generally true? If you take a cross-section of men and a cross-section of women, are the men going to be physically stronger than the women on average? Yeah. Is every single man stronger than every single woman? Is the weakest man stronger than the strongest woman? If you think so, break open a bodybuilding magazine that shows any pictures from the women's divisions, and you'll look at some of these women and go, man, I wish I had arms like that. Wow. Might not be terribly attractive to you, but there's some very strong women out there. So that's a statistical truism. And so something like Nazareth is a bad neighborhood. Nazareth is a nasty little town. If you find out someone's from Nazareth, they're probably like a Nazarene. Probably. But maybe not. But here's the idea here. Loosely hold your first impressions. Now be very aware that most other people will not loosely hold their first impression of you. So be careful about the first impression you make. Being aware the beginning of your first impression you make is whatever first contact is. If first contact is, say, through social media, Facebook or MySpace, what they think of you will be determined by what they first encounter about you. If it's by email, by phone. And this is true with business, too. If someone calls a business and say they call me at my martial arts school and someone answers the phone and says, yeah, what? So, is this the karate school? Yeah, what do you want? Nothing, thank you. And they'll hang up, right? But they hear, Guardian Academy, how may I help you? With the name of whoever it was that answered the phone for us. Much more pleasant. Much more likely to continue on with the next part of their question. So be aware of the first impression you make, but when dealing with someone else, hold loosely to the first impressions you receive. Might have caught someone on a bad day. You might be making assumptions about somebody that aren't true based upon, say, the way they're dressed. Maybe based upon their demeanor. Maybe based upon their hairstyle. Maybe based upon their hair color. Especially if it doesn't resemble anything you would normally see in nature. You see someone show up with a giant, brilliant, almost day-glow red spiked mohawk. You might make certain assumptions about him. You hold loosely to those assumptions, so that you can consider the actual reality. Now, loosely hold your starting points in particular. So say, for instance, if you know that, well, this type of group of people are usually like, fill in the blank, whatever it is. It could be, based on sex, that most men are, most women are. Like today, there's a big Charger game going on. That we live in San Diego, California. Chargers are our team. Playoff game going on today. Chargers versus the Jets. Statistically speaking, if you meet a man in the city of San Diego today, do you figure he's probably going to have some interest in the game? Probably. Statistically speaking. If it's a woman, will it be as probable? Not as probable. But might she still be interested in the game because it's the Chargers? It's the team. Now, if someone is interested in, say, there's a kid thing going on. There's a big kid event. And it's going to be really, really important for all the kids to go. Who is more likely to know more about that event? The mother or the father? More likely which? The mother. So if you want to know about it, would you be more likely to ask the mother? Yes. Might it be that the father is the one that actually knows? Yeah, it could be. That's a similar. You hold loosely to your starting points. Whatever your assumptions are, you can launch from them because they may be valid assumptions. But the valid assumptions are a beginning, not an end. They are a beginning, not an end. As you begin to learn, you might find out that in this particular family, that the woman handles something that statistically speaking is more commonly handled by the man, but in this family it's handled by the woman. Simple example would be my mother. When it comes to construction on the house, the building of fences, the laying of concrete, all of the outdoor landscaping stuff, she's always handled that. Part of it is, when I was growing up, she did everything at the home because my father worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 solid years. That he had to take time off from work in order to be home. He had to take time, schedule time, carve time out from his work schedule to go on vacations and make all of his arrangements beforehand. That was his work schedule. And so my mother handled everything at the house. Well, now she's married to my stepfather. My father died, over 20 years ago now. She still handles all of it. As a consequence, my stepfather really doesn't know anything about that stuff because she always handled it. But when they're talking to a contractor, guess who the contractor will talk to about the construction? Will usually keep talking to my stepfather. And he will occasionally remind him that, well, I don't handle any of that stuff. She does. You need to talk to her. So hold loosely to your starting points. Remember, starting points may be valid statistically, but they are a beginning, not an end. Nathanael held loosely enough to come and see when Philip asked him to. So should we. So you come and see. Nathanael wanted to know, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? And Philip said, come and see. And Nathanael went and he saw. And he met Jesus. He found truth. One of the most important truths in history, because he held just loosely enough to his assumptions about this group of people called Nazarenes that he was willing to come check out this Nazarene. Not just assuming, well, he's from Nazareth. I mean, we're done. Why do I need to come see? Reality is more important than anything we believe. It's okay to start with our belief, because that's why we believe it. We think it's true. But we always hold loosely enough to be willing to have our minds changed by the truth. We always hold loosely enough to be willing to have our minds changed by the truth. Father God, we pray your hand and blessing on us this week as we seek to glorify you in who we are and how we conduct ourselves. If there are any places where we have clung too tightly to our assumptions, clung too tightly to our statistical truisms, help us to loosen our grip on that, to loosen our grip on our starting points, to loosen our grip on our first impressions that we have of other people. And if we have any things we hold as absolute truisms that really are just statistical truisms, Lord, help us to loosen our grip on that too. And if we have any just flat out wrong assumptions, wrong prejudices, wrong biases, if we discriminate on the basis of some of these biases that truly are incorrect, help us, Lord, to be knocked up the head if necessary with the reality, with the truth. That for us here at Agathos, reality is more important than anything we believe. Help us, Lord, to know what beliefs to hold how tightly. Move in us, Holy Spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, that we may walk in greater truth, in harmony with you, in spirit, soul, body, and heart, that we can be a gospel, that if people know us, they will be drawn to you, because they will see something in us of you. In Jesus' name.